What if? This is the question I often find myself asking at this time of year, though if you ask my husband, he'll tell you that I'm happy to ask that question any time of year. But I find that generally around this season, there's something about reflecting on the year behind me and looking forward to the year ahead that leaves me wondering, what if? But I also find myself consumed with this question when it comes to reading the weekly Torah portions that accompany us at this season. Last week, we completed the reading of the first book of Torah, the book of Genesis, an incredible saga tracing the beginnings of our world, the creation of humanity, and the start of monotheism. We are first introduced to God through creation and recreation after Noah, where God controls what is created and what survives. Then, through the eyes of a family, we come to learn more about God, but even more than that, we learn lessons about humanity and family, and truths about the human condition still extraordinarily relevant to life today. This week, the opening chapters of Exodus set the stage for what's to come, marking a significant transition in our sacred text from a focus on a single family to the creation and development of a people. Shabbat shalom, we love you. It's like every rabbi's worst nightmare that people just like scream when you start the sermon, you know? I won't take it personally. But really, we're always glad to have babies in our chapel. It is in Exodus that the phrase, the children of Israel, no longer refers to the actual immediate offspring of Jacob, but to an entire nation. We move from individual relationships and responsibility to this collective identity and this idea of collective responsibility, while still hanging on to that idea of individual responsibility as well. So why does this have me asking what if? Because at every step of the way in the Exodus story, there are individuals who make choices that drastically altered the history told in our Torah. Here are just some of the what ifs I have from this week's Torah portion. What if the new Pharaoh hadn't enslaved the Israelites? What if Shiphrah and Puah, the Hebrew midwives, who were told to kill all of the male babies born to Israelite women, had heeded Pharaoh's instruction instead of avoiding it? There would have been no Moses. What if Pharaoh hadn't believed Shiphrah and Puah's excuse of not being able to arrive before the babies were delivered? Might he have gotten new midwives? What if Yocheved and Amram, Moses' mother and father, hadn't taken their chances hiding their infant and then sending him down the river Nile in a basket? What if Pharaoh's daughter hadn't been bathing in the river at that exact moment that Moses' basket floated by? And what if she didn't choose to save him? What if Moses had never been moved by the suffering of the Israelites to intervene? What if he had never noticed the burning bush? What if? Our ancient rabbis debate many of these points in their commentary on this portion. It's pretty amazing. They too are overwhelmed by the what ifs. What are the chances that all of these things came into one place at the right time for all of this to happen? Seriously, they really debate all these things. One of my favorite, this is just a sidebar for fun Jewish knowledge, but one of my favorite things that the rabbis talk about is the rabbis are wondering why on earth was Pharaoh's daughters even bathing in the river in the first place? Seeing that she is a princess, one would think that the servants would go down to the river, get the water, and bring it back to the palace for her to be able to bathe in the privacy of the palace. Just so you know, their answer is that she is showing that she doesn't agree with her father. So they really get creative there. But I love that. I love that they're playing with this idea of what if and why. But what they're trying to work out is how it is that the story unfolded in the exact way that it did. And of course, there is a possible answer. It was just God's will. Luckily, at least for me, our commentators don't seem satisfied with that answer, and it's lucky for me because nor do I. It's never been an answer that is set well with me. As a spunky and opinionated high school student, I know you're surprised that was my personality. I recall getting into a friendly debate with one of my dear friends who was a devout, and still is a devout Christian. It upset her endlessly that I refused to believe in fate. We would argue about it for weeks on end. After many back and forths, I asked her, Ellie, if fate exists, whether or not I believe in it, it would still impact me. We left it at that. But perhaps I could have explained it more eloquently had we already been using our prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, back then. Just before we started the Amidah, the piece, the one line right before the section that we read, just before the Amidah is a quote from Rabbi Ferdinand Isserman, who also, fun fact, was Rabbi Harry Edelson's assistant rabbi in Philadelphia before Rabbi Edelson moved here. The internet's an amazing thing. But he says, Rabbi Isserman, pray as if everything depended on God. Act as if everything depended on you. I like to think of this as Judaism's insurance plan. Regardless of what we believe God's role to be in the world, we still must act as if everything is in our own hands. Even though, as modern biblical scholar Nachum Sarna puts it, speaking about Exodus, he says that God is the sole actor, the initiator of events. And I just can't quite accept that. Of course, there are many parts of the Exodus story that are too great to assign to mere human choice. The burning bush, the plagues, the splitting of the sea, the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Okay, I get it. There are things that are big miracles and are inexplainable that humans could not have created. But there are many parts too, those what ifs that I shared, that I'm just incapable of chalking up solely to God. What attracted me to Judaism as a teen, and still today, is the idea that God is relevant and perhaps even active in our lives, whether or not we believe it, who knows? We never will. But it's the idea that we are responsible for our own lives. Every High Holy Days, we evaluate ourselves, check in, see how we're doing. We apologize for our wrongdoings to those we have wronged, and only then do we make amends with God. We are reminded constantly at the High Holy Day season that we have the ability to choose. We may not control every outcome in our lives, but we certainly control how we respond to situations, how we interact with other humans, how we treat ourselves, the expectations we set, and so on. Perhaps this is why the Exodus story is often used throughout the Torah and our tradition to remind us how to treat others. It serves as a reminder that it is up to each of us to decide how we respond to the stranger, to the other. We wouldn't need to be reminded to love the stranger if it wasn't in our own power to choose to do so. God knows we need the reminding. So where does this leave us with God? What do we do with the what ifs? Even Moses seems to be confused about who God is. In this week's portion in chapter 3, verse 13, it reads, Moses said to God, God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is God's name? A fair question. Moses asks, what shall I say to them? In the following verse, God responds to Moses saying, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. This odd phrase, thought to be derived from the Hebrew root for to be, has been translated many ways. I am that I am who I will be what I will be. Others have translated as, I am whatever I choose to be, or I am pure being. Don't you wish you could respond that way when someone asks you your name? Psychologist Eric Fromm interprets the name another way. It's a very long definition, but this is all that what he puts in that Ehyeh asher ehyeh. He says it means I, God, am in the process of becoming. Neither I nor human understanding of me is yet complete. And you, human beings fashioned in the image of God, are also in the process of becoming. He's saying all of that is encapsulated in that Ehyeh asher ehyeh. And maybe this is why the book of Exodus is named Shemot, meaning names in Hebrew. It serves as a reminder that no matter God's role in the world, regardless of whether or not fate exists, human agency does exist and matters. The choices we make and the actions we take are what give us our name. The Exodus is our reminder to turn that what if things were different, what if things had happened differently, into so whats. So what choice am I going to make? What am I going to choose to do? As we stand on the precipice of the new year, remembering that we too are in the image of God, that we too are Ehyeh, in the process of becoming always. My prayer as we enter 2019 is may we find the godliness in our ability to choose who it is we are becoming, bringing meaning to our names. Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom.